we are talking about self-awareness and drawing lessons from King David, which will be our subject of devotion. I've written a book called Leadership King David Style. So the things I'll be sharing are actually available in the book. Next time you are near the Scripture Union bookshop, you could pick a copy. But I regard King David as the very best example of a good leader. The other leaders in the Bible, many of them, but other than Jesus Christ, there always be but. But if you look at the leadership of King David, you will see a person who started leading right as a small boy and died a leader, and all the time doing things that please the Lord. He was human. That's how we know about Bathsheba and Uriah's wife story. He was very human, but somebody who was self-aware. If you want to know that he was self-aware, just look at the book of Psalms 51, as he is talking to God about the reality of his sinfulness and admitting without any defense and excuses that he is the one who has failed, but that he knows a God who forgives. And he is crying to God, give me a new heart, restore unto me the joy of my salvation. And that's what makes David such an attractive figure. You know, if you are so perfect, people say, I don't think anybody can be at that level. So you feel like, I can't copy that. It's too high. But David is real. You can watch his life and want to follow it. And you'll see there are many things in the process that you also have filled in, but you believe in a God who can help you out of it. And so basically that's what we are discussing this morning. I am picking just one short story. The story of David and Goliath. First of all, remember, this is a small boy. In fact, he is not a military man. He is a boy who is normally a shepherd boy. But the father sends him with to check how the brothers are in the army. And so this small shepherd boy ends up in the army, but he's still a very small boy. The first thing we must, in this group I'm discussing, I want you to understand is that it's a lie for people to tell you you are the leaders of tomorrow, that we're preparing you for leadership tomorrow. My friend, if you are not leading now, chances that you'll ever lead are very slim. The New Testament quotes David in Acts chapter 13, verse 36, saying, when David had fulfilled God's purpose for his generation, he fell asleep. And your generation is as young as you are and is as old as you are. What that means is that you are not going to be a leader of tomorrow. You are leading your generation now. And that small boy, he was already leading at the age he was, despite the fact that he is a teenager, he had not reached the military age, which in Israel was the age of 20. And sometimes I look back to my life and remember as a small boy in 1958. I was born 1952, so you can say 1958, I wasn't very big. I was made a prefect in my class, 58, 59, I was a prefect. I didn't even know how to write down. The people who came late, I had to memorize with my head because I didn't know how to actually write it down. And look back from 1958 to date, and see 65 years later, the many opportunities God has given me in leadership. And seeing that the challenges I had as a prefect in class 1, I still face them now in later years. But the same God who helped me that time is the same God who is helping me now. And I thought self-awareness then begins by understanding that you are not too young to lead. and that God expects you to be leading even right now, not in future. Anyway, let's speak a bit from the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 17. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. Jesse was his father. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." David said to Saul, I'm skipping some verses, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." This is a small boy who is offering to fight Goliath, who has completely terrorized the big military men of Israel. Let me go on. But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned out on me,"
recording in progress,
which is of course what would happen if you stopped a bear eating your sheep. When the bear came, when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. David fastened on his word, so that gives him the qualification to actually face the military man. He fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in this. The king can see this small boy will be killed. And he has no military clothes. So he gives him his armor. He tries, he can't fit. He said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into the forehead and he fell face down on the ground. We don't have a lot of time, but it's a very, very interesting story. And I drew several lessons all about self-awareness. The first one is the one I started with. The youth are not leaders of tomorrow. He is just a boy by the time he kills Goliath. Self-awareness is understanding that there are certain things you can't do, but there are things you can do at your age. There are certain things that require money and you don't have money, so you can't do. But there are many other things that don't require money and you can do. And if you don't learn that and ability to self-assess yourself, see the level you are, and start operating at your level, and you have what we call procrastination. Always think, when I grow old, I will do this. When I grow old, I will do that, the other. My friend, you'll waste time and lose experience that could help you later. This small boy was a leader as a shepherd. He would face serious troubles and pray to God for help. God would deal with them. That's how he was prepared to be able to handle Goliath. So that's the first lesson I learned out of this story. The second lesson, God, who helps with boyish pursuits, helps also with the national pursuits. Because He is the same God. Self-awareness means that you are aware of who you are and whose you are. Let me repeat. Self-awareness means that you know who you are and whose you are. And you may come from a very poor background in terms of your parents are not rich. But you don't belong to your parents. You belong to God. And once you know whose you are and who you are, it means you can face whatever challenge there is to face, however difficult it is. And I think that's a very important thing to be aware of. That the God who is helping you in small areas will help you in bigger issues, and He remains the same God. And because you belong to Him, then you are quite okay. You may be poor yourself, but if your employer has enough money, you will do all the projects your employer tells you to do, because you are not depending on your own money. You are depending on your employer's money. Similarly, the big secret, and I hope every one of us gets it, is to depend on God. Lesson number 3. This guy, the young boy, was not rude to the king. He actually clears with the king, goes to King Saul, and he knows that all of them are afraid of Goliath. But he bothers. When the man says, try to wear my armament, he doesn't rudely refuse. He actually tries to wear until he is unable to carry it. He respects the king despite his weakness. The king who could not fight, but he did not copy the king's ways. And the lesson here I'm learning is that if you are going to be a good leader, you must be interested in studying other people's leadership style. Look at the way your mother leads your family. Look at the way your father leads his family. Look at the way the headmaster leads your school. Look at the way the pastor leads the church. Give them respect. But when you see they are doing things that God would not back, my friend, you don't copy them. You can respect people without copying them. Do not think just because your father failed, you also fail. Do not think because Nganga failed, you also fail. Why? Because you don't belong to Nganga, you belong to God. So here I'm emphasizing that people that end up being leaders are people who actually respect the Lord's anointed. And that was one key thing about David. Even when King Saul later would try to kill him, he remained respectful. People who don't respect others might never earn respect for themselves. Leadership means knowing what is required and trying to get what is required, but in a way that honors those in authority, those who are older than you, those who are your leaders. And I think that will be important. Fourthly, still in the story of David and Goliath, I just pick it out of this idea of he is unable to fit within the armament of the king. He felt, if I am really to win this battle, I better rely on what I'm used to. He was happy in his own skin. Happy in his own skin. My friend, that idea of always trying to be like others is something that will defeat anybody. You compare yourself with others and you don't feel as good, you're as good as them. In fact, the biggest weakness you can ever have is that one of comparing yourself with others. You are a unique. I think it's David Mason who said, you are born an original. Don't die a copy. Leaders who accomplish things are leaders who accept themselves the way they are and accomplish things the way they are able to, without having to think that because I'm not like so and so, I cannot accomplish. They were happy, or they are happy in their skin. They are not trying to be like somebody else. They do not try to change how they look. They do not change how they speak. They are themselves. And then they use their strength. Because all of us, God has given us strength in order to accomplish what God has given us to do. For him, all it took was, I am good as a shepherd, I always use stones. And I'm able to do a lot of damage on the enemy. So he took smooth stones, and they have worked for him even when facing a national war. They can work. And so, like you have just read, he took the stone, swung it, and the Goliath was dead. Let me ask you, what is it that God is giving you to achieve currently? Not far into the future. But because you feel like I don't have this, I don't have the other, so and so is better than me, you are not even trying because of trying to compare yourself with others. Ask it differently. What are the gifts God has given you? I've written a book called Discovering Your Life's Purpose. That is still part of this issue of self-awareness. There is a calling on your life, and nobody else has been called like that. Only you has been called to that calling. Your parents do not have that calling. So, go your journey. Don't try to copy somebody else. And you'll see your accomplishments will be great. Finally, I learned from this story that you should not have self-confidence. You know, Goliath is saying, you have come to me like that. Can't you see who I am? Do you know who I am? He had confidence in himself. David talked with him and said, you come in your strength. I come in the name of the Lord. If you really want to be a leader that will accomplish, don't have self-confidence. Avoid self-confidence. Have God confidence. And the two are different. Self-confidence means you just rely on what you are able. God confidence means that if God has asked me to do something, he will make me do way above my abilities. And so you face life not looking at your history or the history of your relatives, but on God's calling on your life. So you are not moving in self-confidence. You are moving in God confidence. So when you talk about self-awareness, then, I repeat and I'm concluding, self-awareness means understanding who you are, your weaknesses, your strength. Number 2, understanding God's calling on your life and what he wants you to accomplish, which may not be what somebody else is supposed to accomplish. Then 3, knowing that he is not leaving you alone. He will give you the ability to accomplish it. And so you don't trust in yourself, you trust yourself in God's hands. And I pray that as you think about David and Goliath's story, the lesson on self-awareness, this small boy who was so self-aware, Eliab, his brother, is frightening him, but he doesn't get frightened. Goliath is trying to frighten me because he knows what God has done through him before. As he faces a lion, as he faces a bear, he is self-aware of the God he believes in. So he is able to face, understanding that God's battle are fought by God. And as he goes into it, he is going in the name of the Lord, and the Lord himself will handle it. May the Lord help every one of us to move away from trusting self to starting to trust in God. Number 1. Number 2, making a commitment to follow God's calling in our life and putting our hands in it rather than fearing and becoming paralyzed because the enemy is great. Thank you very much. The meeting is back to William.